You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, your host for BioTalk. And we have a double your pleasure today. We have two senior executives from Kelly Services. And I would imagine a lot of our listeners have heard the name Kelly, providing temps for a long time in their earlier days, but now they're a multi-global, full-service company, and we're going to learn about all of those services they provide from somebody on the West Coast and somebody on the East Coast. So we're covering California and the Mid-Atlantic area on one BioTalk podcast today. So with us from Kelly Services, we have Sarah Porter, who is the Vice President from Kelly Government Solutions. And then we have Brad Sibbald, who's Vice President from Kelly Science and Clinical. Welcome, Sarah and Brad.
Great to be here, Rich. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Well, rather than me try to read your bios and introduce you, you probably know yourselves better and what the listeners would like to learn about you. So I'm going to start with Brad. You can do a little self-introduction of yourself, Brad, and we're going to get into the details around the company and the units you guys are running later. But give us a little background, Brad.
Yeah. So Brad Sibbald, I'm the Vice President of our Science and Clinical Division. I've been here at Kelly for 15 years, but I am a scientist by trade and education, like many of us here in the specialty domain that I manage today. So 15 years ago, before joining Kelly, I had my own startup company in San Diego. So like many other innovative companies in the biohealth corridor area, I was a startup of a PI. We got off of San Diego State campus. We had an antibody that we were using for oncology, and we actually took that to market. And I actually used Kelly to overcome a lot of our humanization issues that we had, a lot of our QMS and quality issues, because we were grad students without any industry experience, but a great idea. And a couple of years later, I decided to look for a new job. And here I stumbled across Kelly, and they said, why don't you sell for us? And that was the beginning of my experience in workforce solutions. And here I am 15 years later. So that's kind of my story. And because none of us really go to school thinking we're going to get into workforce solutions, right? But that's kind of my story of how a scientist became a workforce solutions professional. With that, I'll pass it over to Sarah to introduce herself.
Yeah. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Brad. Sarah Porter. I lead our government solutions practice for Kelly Services within the Science, Engineering, Technology, and Telecom business unit. And our team is responsible for providing outsourced solutions, including program delivery to the federal government as both a prime and subcontractor. My background is specifically in successful business operations, HR, and project management overall. And I didn't necessarily expect at the beginning of my career that I would go after and spend so much time directly supporting the federal government, but definitely love what I do and what we're able to support. I do have about 20 years industry government experience, spending a little more than 10 years as a program manager directly supporting the National Institutes of Health. And I really have a personal passion for the impact that our teams have in improving the health outcomes for really everyone across the globe, not just the American people, but also really serving America through defense industry, research and development, safety, compliance, and advocacy within the biohealth arena as well.
Well, thank you, Sarah and Brad, for your introductions. And basically, you're both in the sweet spot for what BioHealth Innovation, my company, does, and what we're very heavy in the BioHealth Capital Region, which is Maryland, D.C., and Virginia, where I know both of you have clients that are involved in that region, especially in the federal government. But Brad, Sarah mentioned the Kelly Science, Engineering, Technology, and Telecom Business Unit, which was the fourth different entity within Kelly that we've talked about already. And I know you're going to give us a little update on that unit, which I think both of you report to. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows the name Kelly. I mean, we started the staffing industry in 1946. And so we have been around and been cutting edge and one of the top providers of workforce solutions ever since. And that's kind of one of the reasons why Sarah and I have been here so long is Kelly always continues to be at the cutting edge of what's going on out there. And we both, yes, we report into our what we call SET business unit, that stands for Science, Engineering, Technology, and Telecom. And that's one of the four major business units within Kelly Services. And the four major are obviously the Kelly Services professional industrial brand, where a lot of people think about your light industrial, your HR temps, your finance, things like that. And then the STEM specialties really reside within SET. And a lot of people don't know this, but we are the number one provider of substitute teachers. So our Kelly Education brand is the largest provider of substitute and higher education professionals. So that's a huge business unit within Kelly. And then our last business unit is our outsourcing and consulting group, Kelly OCG, that really manages large multi-billion-dollar programs like Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, Gilead, Kite, things like that, from a managed service provider and SOW management perspective. So yeah, that's how Kelly's kind of broken up today. But within SET, our goal is really to be supporting innovation and solving the world's most critical challenges. So that's really our tagline here in SET. So we live and breathe that every day.
Excellent. And I think we're going to talk a little bit later, but you're a little more on the commercial side. Sarah's a little more on the government side. So that's a blend of the business between the both of you. And we're going to learn a little more deeper dive into both segments by each of you. So before we do that, though, Sarah, why don't we talk a little bit about your federal government and history at NIH, which you talked about briefly?
Absolutely. I'd love to get into that. So across our team, we've been in the government sector really pretty much since the introduction of Kelly, but much more formally for the last 30 years or so. And during that time, basically for more than 20 years, we've had an ongoing relationship with the NIH. We have around 1,000 employees that support the research projects at NIH, really across all institutes and centers, all areas of research from basic to preclinical and clinical services as well. And we even have employees who've been with us over that time period, moving between different projects and providing support across the agency. We're really proud of that history, both for the opportunity to have supported major recent initiatives within NIH, including some of the developments in COVID research, the cancer moonshot, precision medicine, as well as a number of other translational projects that have been really important to the continued both funding initiatives as well as just development of discoveries for the improvement of health across the world. With that longstanding relationship, we've been able to continue to tailor our services to target additional opportunities within the federal government that are really adjacent. So we've continued to build out work with primary HHS within CDC and even supporting the Department of Energy National Laboratories. We have a good bit of work across SLAC, Argonne, and NREL, really within combinations of the research and engineering side of operations as well as science. So there's a lot of adjacencies between what's done at NIH, even though it's a very different focus overall. But a lot of the mentalities and has made us successful at NIH has transferred to what we're able to do and deliver for these other agencies, as well as our continued pursuit and support of both the VA and within even looking at the Defense Health Agency as well, within more healthcare and clinical services as well.
Well, 1,000 employees is quite a few. And then you used a term that we use a lot, and that's translational. Can you build on that a little bit? Because we tend to focus more on commercialization area than more the basic research or proof of concept. So did you use translational in that term, or is it a different relationship, Sarah?
No, it's very similar to that, because initially, and a lot of the primary focus at NIH is that basic research that enables then future discoveries and developments, drug development and otherwise. Within industry, sometimes there can be certain projects that maybe won't get as much funding, or areas of research that are important for public health, but may not initially have the excitement around to be able to kind of get off the ground. And so NIH focusing on some of those areas can really help kickstart the process. And I know there has been focus both with NIH and with ARPA-H about getting additional technologies moved forward to stages where you can get it into actual preclinical, clinical trials, all of that. And so there's certainly a major focus in what we do and support on the translational and NIH side, but also kind of going beyond that with other agencies as well.
Thank you for that explanation, Sarah. That's very educational for our listeners. One last thing before I kick it back to Brad. You mentioned Cancer Moonshot. So we just got the announcement this week that President Biden, they were going to provide $150 million for the Cancer Moonshot. And ARPA-H, which is a brand new federal agency over the last couple of years, is going to be one of the agencies actively involved in implementing that program. Talk a little bit about your relationship there.
Yeah, so taking one step back, the National Cancer Institute, with our relationship with NIH, we've had a number of scientists over the years really supporting both from basic lab-based bench research all the way through senior scientists who are supporting the various projects within NCI overall. And Cancer Moonshot really started back toward the tail end of the Obama administration. And we had folks working on the project starting then. And now, as you've mentioned, it's sort of catapulting into another phase or era with the ARPA-H support. And we're really excited reading recently about the focus that ARPA-H has, and really recommend everybody go out to their website, take a look at the project. But they're focused on trying to provide funding to be able to develop new testing mechanisms that can be more home-based, more accessible for a variety of populations, kind of speed testing and development to target certain cancers that may not even have testing mechanisms right now. And so those are areas that we can support through our workforce solutions in terms of whether it's a new project influx that's needed, that there's a specific phase of the program that needs to have additional resources, or even just with specialists in certain areas that we can tap into through our networks.
Thank you for adding on to that. Now let's kick it back to Brad, a little bit more from the commercial sector. Brad, talk a little bit about your workforce solutions in the commercial sector, similar to what Sarah did in the government sector.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So obviously, from a science and clinical perspective, we support all facets of the life sciences market, from contract support. We do a lot of project, and then the true FTE niche search. Obviously in science, right, there's so many different skill sets that align to getting, early stage discovery scientists through regulatory and quality scientists and experts. So we do a really great job. I've got about 50 recruiters that are all science degreed, and we cover the whole North American market to be able to find those niche scientists that clients need. But from a commercial standpoint, obviously post-COVID, we all saw a downward turn over last year. Overall, the employment market dropped about 15% in the commercial space across the biotech and pharma markets. But what we're most excited about is kind of the shifts in the way that people are hiring talent. And the great part is we are on an upswing right now. We are seeing some really positive trends moving into the second half of 24, and then some great outlooks looking for the first half of 25, seeing significant increases in investments, obviously a lot of commercialization of things like CAR-T, additional clinical trials coming to market. But with the shift in the gig economy, that's what we're noticing here, is a lot of people are starting to realize that post-COVID, with remote work, things like that, that people are looking for a variety of opportunity. They're looking to maybe build their own LLC or their 1099 and become an independent consultant. We're also seeing a shift in longer term contract engagements. And so we have built a whole new division within our offerings, which we're calling statement works, because it's really around a statement of work or a scope of work. And so we're seeing a lot more virtual biotechs. We're seeing so much more collaboration in order to get therapies to market. And this goes hand in hand with that. It's almost like a functional service provider model, where we're providing full-time benefits to our contractors. We're hiring them as FTEs here at Kelly, and then we lease them out to our company partners. So kind of like a full-time consultant or a bench of consultants that can be functionally provided to companies for long-term engagement. So this can just be resource delivery to come in and augment your team for a year or two. It can be functional onshore and offshore hybrid teams that are going to do a full new QMS build or a QMS improvement plan, or come in and write regulatory documents for you, things like that, launch clinical trials. And then we also are seeing a huge surge in companies fully outsourcing certain departments of their company. Think about things like essential services within a biomanufacturing division. These are the folks that autoclave, steam in place, clean in place the bioreactors, or think about maybe an environmental monitoring team or a packaging team. These are essential functions to the company, but they're also sometimes harder for management to focus on from a management perspective, from a who's in, who's out, auditing perspective, training, career building. So we're seeing so much outsourcing of that to a Kelly. We come in and we oversee that team, we manage that team, we ensure that their productivity continues to increase. So we're really excited about how the actual job market is transcending into the future. So those are what's kind of new in the commercial space for life sciences.
Two things I'd like to pick up on, Brad. One is you mentioned the gig economy, which you haven't heard much about that now, but I think really we're in the gig economy because of that 15% decrease you've talked about in workforce. There's a lot of people out there, but they're very knowledgeable. They have great skills, but they just were a victim of circumstances, apparently. But you mentioned the gig economy, then you mentioned something else which is not normally related to the gig economy, and that's benefits. So what you're saying is it's different than what I've heard in the past is part-time employees or maybe full-time who may be contracted out over a period of time getting and able to get benefits, which normally does not happen in the gig economy. So talk a little bit about that and that trend.
Yeah, no, it's important because a lot of people have families. They need that medical, dental, vision, that 401k. They also want PTO. At the end of the day, they still want that opportunity to take a break, take a breath, and get paid for it. And so this is a perfect combination of that, because if you partner with a company like Kelly, we've got hundreds, if not thousands, of industry partners that are looking for consultants, and we bring them in, but we also indemnify that client for that 1099 or independent consultant or that W-2'd benefited long-term consultant. So the company wants to know that they can identify the best talent, but the big thing is they want to retain it. Intellectual property, as you know, in startups and developing companies is a huge thing. They want to know that they can keep that employee for the length of that project. And we have found that if we link full-time benefits, 401k, and they really feel like it's an FTE role, but then they can come in and finish a project from start to finish and add that to their resume, which will allow them to eventually build their own consulting clientele. We're seeing so much investment in that type of solution.
You mentioned one other thing, and I'm going to flip it back to Sarah in a second, but you mentioned intellectual property. Now, we have a number of part-time consultants that provide entrepreneurs in residence that work for NIH or ARPA-H. But one of the things they're concerned about is as they're working with these early stage companies or scientists, there's a lot of IP involved. So how do you deal with people that are working through Kelly related to NDAs and CDAs related to the work they're performing if they're doing work for other people, but they're employed by you?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually have consultants that are doing very similar jobs to multiple companies at the exact same time. So it does come down to the way that they sign NDAs and execute against those NDAs. But the beauty there is Kelly is that indemnifying party, and we are responsible for co-managing of that employee. So not only will they take technical direction from our clientele, but we have program managers and talent engagement specialists, project managers here at Kelly that ensure that we are meeting that intellectual property and those NDA limitations. But you'll find that a lot of companies will allow consultants to even have their own company on the side today because it's about getting their project done. They just want that expertise to come over from their previous or current experience.
Yeah, so the employers have to be a lot more flexible and more nimble today in order to get the top talent because really the talent's dictating.
And they're everywhere, Rich. I mean, we're seeing a huge influx in biomanufacturing in the middle America, right? Think about the new Eli Lilly site or the new Amgen site in Cincy, right? I mean, these are cutting edge, top-notch technology in middle America, and they need some cutting edge talent from the coasts to either move in or be that hybrid player.
Thank you. These are comments from Brad Sibbald, who's basically the vice president for Kelly Science and Clinical, more on the commercial side. Now, Sarah, we're talking about Sarah Porter, vice president for Kelly Government Solutions. Sarah, talk a little bit about some of the trends you're seeing in workforce solutions more from the government side, just like Brad did from the commercial side.
I think one of the biggest developments that we've seen is a bit of a more intensive focus on preparedness and response and how that plays into the whole ecosystem, given what happened. Hindsight is 2020, right? We can look back and go, wow, we really were not prepared. We rapidly got things together and really did what I will say I feel like was a notable and tremendous job with the COVID pandemic response. But now we're being a lot more thoughtful, especially in government, about how we're prepared for that in the future and other related potential events. So we're seeing a lot of focus on development of skill sets and resources in preparation, and also being ready with, if we needed to scale and surge for something, having mechanisms in place to do that, so there won't be as much last minute or having to pick something up at a moment's notice, and just having things outlined ahead of time and really getting that solidified. And then as it works to support that, some of the back-end analytics and even using AI and machine learning to help aid in those preparedness preparations, so that we're leveraging those tools and techniques, looking back at what happened during the pandemic, using that as learning points and doing those reviews, and then being able to project that forward. So yeah, I think that's a big area of focus. And then additionally, just within the aspect of research, both the focus on analytics and bioinformatics, that also is becoming just a key area of focus, or continuing to be. We see it as being really imperative that our scientists have a broader skill set that encompasses some form of programming and data analytics skills as well.
I think that's a great point when you talk about AI and ML, because the reason we named BioHealth Innovation 12, 13 years ago was the convergence between life sciences and technology coming together. You mentioned AI, machine learning, and quantum. Talk a little bit about the talent and whether or not there's a great enough talent pool in AI machine learning as it relates to what the needs are within the life science industry. And maybe we can go Sarah first within government, and then we'll go back to Brad within the commercial world and talk about talent in that emerging area, which everybody seems to need, but not exactly know what they want to do with it.
Agreed. So from our standpoint, there is definitely still a shortage of talent, and folks are rapidly skilling up. The great thing is, it's very exciting. And I think any of us who have even a little bit of a technical inclination have started trying to figure out what we can do, both to make ourselves and our businesses more successful using AI and ML tools, but also understanding what that means for the future, both the future of work as well as future discoveries. And that, I think on one good note, we are seeing a lot of universities are integrating either AI or machine learning focuses within their tracks, whether it's within the sciences or business or engineering. It is becoming almost a requirement at this point to include that within the coursework, within where things are headed. But at the same point, I think one of the bigger challenges is it's also changing so fast. So what we saw a year ago is not what we're seeing today, and it's certainly not going forward going to be the same as well. So I think continuing to build skill sets is the critical thing for everybody across science, engineering, tech, and even business. We've got to invest and make sure we're continuing to grow our capabilities as an individual in charge of their own career, and also as a business investing in our team members.
Thank you, Sarah. Brad, what about from the commercial world with AI and ML?
Yeah, I'm on a lot of boards and consortiums around what are the skill sets that not only higher education, but also our trade schools need to be focused on to prepare industry for the next generation. And on the flip side, we just did a rework report and interviewed 4,000 C-suite individuals. And that was the number one thing that was on their mind outside of, do I have the right team, is do my team have the right skill sets? And that subsector was, do we have the right preparedness around AI and ML within our organization? And it's funny, we just saw our first FDA clinical trial from an AI generated drug. We're starting to see more and more of that emerging. So as far as skill sets, we are still very short out there in the world. We are seeing a lot of visa and OPT sponsorships in order to bring that talent to the United States. So we are in support of a lot of those. Companies need to be aware that they need to have virtual roles for these. They should not maintain them to be in-house. It's going to be very hard to keep talent and retain talent if they force them to be in the labs. So a lot of these roles are virtual, really opens up the candidate pool. And we saw a need here at Kelly a couple of years ago, and we actually invested and bought a company, Vita Global Sciences, that is a sister company of ours that is focused on biometrics specifically. So they not only have a bench of bioinformaticists, SAS programmers to satisfy this need, but they also have industry expert recruiters that can go out and identify and bring this talent. So we saw a need and filled a need by partnering and buying a whole company to support that opportunity.
Great. Thank you. It's top of mind for a lot of these executives. By the way, is that 4,000 executive study public, or is that a private study that you did?
It is public, and I'll make sure that we bring some hard copies to your summit next month. I think that would be
That'd be great.
A great handout next month when we see you in Maryland.
Yeah, that's super. And the other thing is, when we publish this podcast, we can put it in the transcription and the link to also let people be able to get it online. So we'll make sure our director, Andy Eckert, who's monitoring this, taking notes in the background, we'll make sure we get that from you. And we're going to talk a little bit about our local region, the BioHealth Capital Region now, Maryland, D.C., Virginia. Even though both of us do things nationally and internationally, we're located in Rockville, Maryland, and I know that's where a heavy presence is for a lot of what both of you do. Let's talk a little bit about the workforce and talent landscape in the BioHealth Capital Region, and if the trends here are any different than what you're seeing on a national basis. I'm going to start with Brad, and then we'll come back to Sarah.
That's a great question. We are so excited about the BioHealth Capital Region. We've been investing not only on my team with additional recruiters and project managers in the market, but Kelly overall. I think I mentioned before that we manage, 92% of the Fortune 100 biotech companies, and the big players out in your market are obviously AstraZeneca and Kite, part of the Gilead family of companies. And we're the master service provider for AstraZeneca and do a lot of support. So obviously we're very busy right now, not only with the new Rockville facility, getting it built, validated, and ready for CAR T manufacturing, but we're also supporting the expansion in Franklin for their biologics manufacturing as well. But it's not just about the big players, right? We do so much for emerging and startup biotech. As you can think, being small, being nimble, and you don't have a full HR team, you don't have a full recruiting engine like an AZ or a Kite does. So we do so much more for the startups because we can be a true extension of them. We can bring all of our expertise, our pipelines of knowledge, our years of industry partnerships to them as it relates to benchmarking, writing job descriptions, best practices, actually being that marketing agent for maybe a new logo. You'll think of like an Arcellx or a Cartesian. These are some of the startups in your marketplace where we support them and they don't have such a brand recognition. So our teams of recruiters and project managers are going out to our network and actually promoting the technology that they have and taking it to market. Another really great success in your region. I live just outside Sacramento, very close to Auburn, California. And I'm sure everybody knows of Miltony, now headquartered in Gaithersburg. Their headquartered used to be here in Auburn. And so I was very close personally with their HR team, and I've been supporting them since they came from Germany over a decade ago and helped them launch their first cell therapy factory here in San Jose in the Bay Area, and then was very integral in procuring their Kyogen building, doing the rebuild, and then building all of their teams out there in Gaithersburg. So here's a great success story of getting a partner like Kelly to be able to identify everything from a manufacturing associate through their regulatory leadership to really build their new headquarters, as well as that second cell factory CDMO there in Gaithersburg.
Well, basically everything starts with your workforce and your employees. So you guys have a pretty good pulse of what's happening in the region right now, I would imagine. So probably almost as much as the commercial real estate developers. And I don't know if you guys work hand in hand with them, but
they're great for happy hour. We love our friends in Alexandria and Cushman and Wakefield. They always know who's moving up, moving out. So absolutely.
Yeah, they're worth buying a bottle of wine for, right? Okay, Sarah, talk a little bit about, from a government solution standpoint, the BioHealth Capital Region. It's very obvious because we're the epicenter for life sciences in the United States based on from a government perspective in this region. But let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think that it is a very exciting place to be. There's a lot of ways to attract talent into this area. If they're not already here for various programs, I mean, we've got a great network with some of the universities totally in the capital region, both here in Maryland as well as DC and Virginia. So, we're pulling a lot of folks in because of that. And then it's certainly notable going to work either commercially or governmentally is a great launch point for most scientists and other biotechnology professionals. I think that continuing to have additional development within both small companies and startups, as well as getting the attention from venture capital is going to help continue to encourage folks to either come in the region or remain in the region. So I think from that aspect, the DMV area is a very attractive place, and we're seeing a lot of good development in that way because of the increased growth and continued investment. And I think that our region is continuing to develop out what we're doing in order to encourage that continued investment and development overall.
The funny thing is we're finding that when we put out a job posting just for our small nonprofit of 30 people, we were looking for an analyst. We had 200 people apply for an analyst. And let's talk a little bit about what people were utilizing as tools to find jobs today. It used to be Indeed seemed to be one of the major areas, but right now the majority of people came through LinkedIn. But we are posting, and it just seems like there's a plethora of talent and people looking for jobs right now. Is that because of the scarcity, the competition? Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing from that competitive aspect of job searching right now.
I think that there is a little bit of a tip in the market overall in terms of the number of quality opportunities out there. So there is a little bit more of a strong interest, seeing a lot more candidates applying to those roles. I think to your point about where are folks going at this point to find opportunities, LinkedIn is absolutely one of the primary tools in the marketplace at this point. But I think what's more important than just LinkedIn and or posting or working through that is actually the networks that have been created. Our recruiters that support our projects, they've been in this arena for basically an average of 5+ years, both I think on my team and Brad's overall. And the connections that they've been able to develop over that time and have within their network and outreach ensures that we're really being a lot more efficient with our searches, right? So it's great to have 200 people apply. I'm sure not all those 200 people were qualified. Unfortunately, it happened.
Probably about 195 of them were.
And so those networks are going to allow you to do a lot more targeted outreach, find the right folks, and also really just continue to develop that interest, because part of it is making sure that the right people, for example, know about BioHealth Innovation, right? Not just the general job seekers too. And so that's a lot of what we focus on overall.
Right. Brad, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, very well said. I would echo a lot of what Sarah said, but at the end of the day, more than 40% of our placements don't come from job postings. And that kind of solidifies what Sarah was saying is it's about your network. You want that referral person. We talk about it's all about who you know, not what you know, but you're absolutely right. You think about people don't understand that it costs about 1.5 somebody's salary to hire somebody, but there's so many hidden costs like a manager's time sifting through all of those resumes to do that. And that's why we find that having an experts at hiring experts model here at Kelly works so well for us because we're scientists. We've been at the bench. We talk the talk. It's a language. We understand it. And then we can do that first screen for you. And so every person that we deliver, we know can do the job technically. Now it's up to you to find that culture fit and that personality fit and the person who clicks with you that you want to go spend 40 hours a week with. But that heavy lifting is there. But there are a lot of tools out there that people can use. And LinkedIn is a fantastic tool. We all use it. But at the end of the day, it's also about networking, being a part of the BioHealth Capital Region. I'll talk a little bit about the event we're coming up with next month and your event. That's what it's all about. It's about getting out there and promoting your brand face to face as much as you can and rubbing elbows with the people that you want to be in 2 to 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, before we go to the BioHealth Capital Region, you had a nice segue because you were talking about direct events that are really not general in nature. And you're going to have a virtual job fair in September. And Brad, you want to lead off and talk a little bit about the concept for this virtual job fair, when it's going to happen, who's it for, and all the details?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We are the first staffing company to ever do something like this. And this is our third annual, and it's been extremely successful. We are the largest provider of talent within the biomanufacturing space, and your corridor is not void of great manufacturing partners, but we are noticing that there is a shortage and a really deep desire as technology advances in the process development space, in the cell therapy space, and we are having a very big shortage in that manufacturing support roles. Because again, you do have to be on site to manufacture something. So that's a big thing, is a lot of people want those virtual roles, but a lot of these, they have to be on site to physically build the therapies of tomorrow. So this is our third annual Experts Exchange. It is going to be a full day. We're going to have a wonderful panel to open up the event where we're going to talk about innovation in the biomanufacturing space and what are those skills and how do we exemplify those skills in skill-based interviews and hiring platforms in order to get those jobs that you want. So you're going to hear from some experts on how to do that. The cool part about this year is then we're going to move to some regional tables. So there's going to be a BioHealth Corridor regional table. There'll be Boston, there'll be RTP, Northern California, so on and so forth, where you can now rub elbows with other networking events like Women in Bio, PDA, ISPE. We're going to also have a lot of our tech school and higher education partners talking about what can you get from some of these certificate level programs to maybe up your skills to get that next job. And then all while behind the scenes, you're going to be able to go to these virtual booths and meet face-to-face over camera hiring managers and recruiters from our industry partners, promoting their companies, their jobs that they're looking to fill, either on contract or on an FTE basis. So it's going to be a really cool event, Rich.
You've told us everything about the event, but you haven't said what date it's going to be, Brad.
Thank you very much. It's September 19th. And a great reminder, I'll get Andy the link. Maybe we'll throw that out there as well. And then you can also find it. You find me on LinkedIn. It's on my LinkedIn. It's on my feed. Everybody at Kelly Science and Clinical is really going to be promoting it, but it's called our Experts Exchange, Innovation in Biomanufacturing.
Great. We'll cross-promote that with our event, which is the BioHealth Capital Region Forum, which, if I'm not mistaken, both of you are going to attend, correct?
We will be there.
Yeah, so in person, in living color rather than virtual, we're going to have Sarah Porter, the Vice President for Kelly Government Solutions, and Brad Sibbald, Vice President, Kelly Science and Clinical, who have been talking on this podcast, September 17th through 19th at the 10th Annual BioHealth Capital Region Forum at US Pharmacopoeia in Rockville. So it's going to be a great place for networking, as you say. And we also agree, I agree with you that having a direct contact or referral is much more effective than that cold calling that you have to do. And our event has proven to be year after year a great connecting point for people to make those contacts for strategic partnerships, potential jobs, investors, and other things that they're looking for during that 3-day period. So we're glad you're both going to join us. Is there anything else that we have not discussed that you'd like the listeners to know about either Kelly Science and Clinical, Kelly Government Solutions, Kelly Services in general, Sarah or Brad?
I think we've covered a lot of great ground. Really just appreciate the opportunity to collaborate. And as we mentioned, this is what it's all about, right? Connecting. We're not quite in person here, but it feels pretty close, and looking forward to making some great connections at the event upcoming in September. And just love the opportunity to continue to discuss the industry and the future state and growth.
Great. Brad?
Yeah, I would just echo that and just remind people that we're here for you. And Kelly, whether you're a scientist or an IT or an engineer or anything, that's the beauty of Kelly is we have experts here that want to meet with you. And whether we have a job for you now or not, what I typically say is we can be a resource for you. We could be a resource for your neighbor, for your friend. And so it's all about getting to know one another. And so I just welcome everybody to reach out and connect with either myself, and I'll make sure that we get you connected with somebody that's an expert in your market, in your area of expertise, and would love to be a partner for your future.
Thank you. Well, I think this has been very informative to me, and I'm sure to the listeners. And we also want to thank you for being a sponsor for the BioHealth Capital Region Forum coming up September 17th through 19th. And your contact information will include in the written transcript, which will be available for everybody, as well as other information related to this podcast. But I want to thank Sarah Porter, Vice President, Kelly Government Solutions, and Brad Sibbald, Vice President, Kelly Science and Clinical, for being on BioTalk today, and look forward to meeting you both in person in almost a month.
Thank you so much, Rich.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.